But the month of August, dead silent.
Correct.
Sir, an owner of the phone has the ability to turn off location information, correct?
That is correct. You can turn off location history at any point.
And you don't just have the power to turn off a particular app. You can literally just turn the phone off and then it goes dark, right?
If you turn the phone off, then it will not record anything.
So if you want to go to Bronze Circle, but you don't want someone to see you, you can simply just turn off the phone, right?
That is possible, yes.
You could go through every single one of your apps that have location information and you could turn those off as well if you wanted to leave your phone on, right?
That is correct.
The power is in the holder of the phone, correct?
Yes.
And this is Mr. Tellis's phone.
Yes.
And that month, and here's the thing, when you reviewed this case, do you know the day that Mr. German died?
I have no idea, sir.
Okay, so if I told you it was September 2nd, you have no reason to dispute that?
No, I don't. I don't know the date.
Okay. But just to be clear, the month before Mr. German dies, he's got no location data on his phone.
That's correct.
For that area.
Correct.
So, I want to turn back to, can we cue over to his like modern presentation than the most recent one? Thank you. All right, so let's look at, sorry, I'm getting confused looking at this presentation thing here. All right, so the 702-533-1858. You reviewed the subscriber information on this, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and just to be clear, 702-533-1858, according to the T-Mobile records, the subscriber is Robert Tellis, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So when you looked at the cell phone records and the pen register, it was all affiliated with Mr. Tellis's cell phone, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When we look at this slide here, August 1st through August 16th, when we look at this information, again, these are just plot points of the phone interacting with a tower. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just to be clear, this does not deal with September 2nd. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And also, just to be clear, if I didn't want to interact with a tower, so when we look at historical records, isn't it true that when you see the tower data, that's because of if a phone called, let's say a phone called my phone, and I picked it up and I answered it, that connection using a cell tower pops up in the record, right?
That is correct, yes.
You would agree with me that if I turn my phone off, there's not going to be a plot point of where my phone is because my phone is not talking to a cell tower, correct?
No, if you turn your phone off, there would be a record of a call coming in, going to voicemail, and there would not be a cell tower.
Right. So when we look at if we look at August 1st through August 16th, and we see like Bronze Circle, it doesn't appear to be a tower that the phone is interacting, right?
Correct.
But let's just say if I turned off my phone and I went to Bronze Circle, it doesn't matter how many times someone calls me, it's never going to show up in the records, right?
Correct.
Because I controlled whether or not someone could see me through that tower information, right?
If you turn it off, there will be no record. Yes.
Right, because the holder of the phone controls the information, right? In terms of tower data, right?
Well,
put it another way. If I don't want any tower records of my movement, all I have to do is hit the power button and turn it off, right?
Yes, you can turn it off, and then there would be no record on any record from the phone company.
So all of the information that we get to this is tied to whether or not the holder of the phone wants to keep his phone on or off, correct?
These is showing all the times that the phone is on. Period.
So the answer to my question is what? It all depends on whether or not the holder of the phone wants to have his location data out there, right?
Well, it depends on whether the owner of the phone wants to have communications with the phone.
Correct. And if Mr. Tellis didn't want to have his communication out there, he could simply turn it off, and you wouldn't be able to see the movement of his phone as it interacts with towers because it can't, correct?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay, and just to be clear, during this month of August, at least for this 2-week period, there's no tower interaction near Brown Circle, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Again, similarly, we see this is the same logic, right? So you've got these pings, but it's dependent on the phone being on to communicate with those towers. Is that right?
Yes.
Moving on to slide 5. This is kind of, a tower near Planet Fitness, correct? So this is on 8/5. So this is not the day of the murder, is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know the date of the murder.
9/2. So it's not 9/2, correct?
Correct.
So we're looking at we're looking in that 2-week window in August, right?
Correct.
Okay. We're looking at 8/28. That's not on 9/2, is it?
Correct.
Let's move on. Let's talk about 9/2. So on 9/2 here, you are indicating that there are data sessions from 1:30 in the morning to 6:44, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and it's interacting at a cell site tower kind of nearby Spanish Steps, right?
Correct.
So this is not incoming or outgoing, is that right?
It's strictly data sessions.
Right, and I think you said, the phone acts passively, right?
It can be active or it can be passive.
And so like people go to sleep and your phone could still be communicating with a tower through a data session. Would that be right?
Yes.
Okay. 6 a.m. to 6:45 to 6:50. Again, these are all data sessions, right?
Correct.
So no outgoing messages or voice calls from this phone, correct?
Correct.
Okay, now we're looking at, this is a very big window of time. We've got 7:09 a.m. to 3:47. Is that correct?
Correct.
And it looks like you're trying to parse out what things are. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm just separating the pen register data from the voice, text, and data.
And just to be clear, one of the things I saw on an earlier slide that you don't have here is you don't denote on this slide if the text messages are incoming or outgoing, correct?
That is correct.
And you don't denote if the voice calls are incoming or outgoing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I'd like to publish. You've read those pen registers. I'd like to publish Exhibit 345. Hold on. Let me bring this over. You're familiar with these records, correct?
Yes.
Oh, wait, this is the wrong one. Hold on a second. Just so we can see this. This is the subscriber records, right?
Correct.
That's how we can see it's Mr. Tellis and it's over at Spanish Steps. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. So I'm now publishing the pen register records. This is what they look like, correct?
Correct.
And essentially, when we look at category A, that's kind of plotting an event, right? Or like an entry point, right? Is that correct?
Column A, I believe it's just like a case number.
Okay, thank you. Column B is the number, right?
Correct.
And that's Mr. Tellis' number, is that right?
Yes.
Column D is the date, is that true?
Correct.
And call type is whether it's a voice or a text or if it's a data session, right?
Correct.
And direction is outgoing and ingoing, correct?
Correct.
Incoming. Sir, I just want to turn your attention to the end of these registers. And just so we're clear, when we were looking at your presentation before and you were mapping out the data sessions, the incoming, well, you didn't do incoming outcome, but you had text messages and voice, that was being pulled from these records that we see here, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Get to, there's a glare and I can't see the scroll button, sorry. Let me. Okay, so do you see this entry point here? For the record, it's 45556. Do you see that, sir?
Yes, sir.
And I think you're familiar with this. Isn't it true that this is for the morning of September 2nd. This is the last outgoing text for a while. Would that be correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and it's outgoing and it's at 8:48, right?
Correct, yes.
And we look at that other slide, when we look at, so when we're looking at, there it is, right? That's up at the top, right? The very first entry, that's an outgoing text message, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So let's go back to these records. So when we start to look after 8:48, you're getting tons of outgoing data, which is kind of, as you testified to, a passive function of a phone, correct?
It can be, yes.
But then you start getting text messages, right? So here's one at 9:16, right?
Correct.
That's incoming though, right?
Correct.
There's another one at 9:16:03, another incoming text, correct?
Correct.
9:16:04, an incoming text, correct?
Yes.
9:26, another incoming text, correct?
Correct.
And this phone is not responding. It's not sending an outgoing text yet. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
We have another incoming text at 9:44. Is that right?
Correct.
Another incoming text at 9:44. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
We have another one. So we've got 1, 2, 3, all within 9:44:53. Incoming text after incoming text, correct?
Yeah, just to clear up, when you have the same time frame, it typically is one large message that's broken down into smaller segments, so it's not necessarily multiple messages. Just so it's clear.
Understood. And so we see this bulk, there's one message coming at 9:44, but it's not responded to immediately, correct?
Correct, yes.
And then at 10:16, we have another text message, right?
Correct, incoming.
And then 1 second later, so the first one's at 10:16:29, the next one's at 10:16:30, another text message, right?
Again, they could be separate. It could be one long message broken down.
Okay, so we're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all being recorded by this phone, right?
Correct.
And there's no immediate response back, right?
Correct.
Then we see at 10:35, nearly 15 minutes later, another text message comes in, or actually nearly 20 minutes later, another text message comes in, right?
Correct.
And there's no outgoing response. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
Now at 10:43, there's 2 voice calls. Isn't that right?
Incoming, correct.
Incoming. So people are now calling the phone, right?
Yes.
It's followed up by an incoming text message, right?
Correct.
We then, now we're almost at 30 minutes later, we have 2 more phone calls coming in, correct?
Correct. Again, that I believe is one actual call. They're within a couple seconds.
Understood. Seems to be the same number, 2 seconds off. But nonetheless, someone is calling that phone 30 minutes after those last text messages, right?
That is correct, yes.
And yet, nothing is going out of that phone. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And then we just have tons of passive outgoing data activity, getting us to about 1:20. Isn't that right?
Yes.
And once again, at 1:20, more incoming calls. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
I mean, it might just be one call, right? Because it's at the same time, same number. Would that be fair?
Yes.
All right. And then we have just a minute and 15 seconds later, another incoming text, right?
Correct.
And then there's another incoming text 2 seconds later. Maybe it's from the same place. Who knows? But we've got another record of it. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And then we have an incoming text from a completely different number. Isn't that true?
Correct.
We have got more. So 2 more coming from that number. Isn't that right?
Again, it could be one long message or multiple messages, all incoming.
Right. But the bottom line is people keep reaching out to this phone. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And we're not seeing a response going out from this phone, are we?
Correct.
Now we get to 1:22. There's another incoming text. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And it appears to be a series from this number.
Correct.
Right? There's 3 of them here. We get another incoming text message at 1:26 from a completely different number. Isn't that right?
Correct.
And yet the phone never sends an outgoing message, does it?
Not during this time, no.
Then we move on to 2:05. Finally, we have an outgoing text. Isn't that right?
Correct.
So from 8:48 in the morning to 2:05 p.m., on the day that Mr. German is murdered, no outgoing texts are being sent from Robert Tellis's phone. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
And there is not a single outgoing phone call from Mr. Tellis's phone at that time. Isn't that right?
That is correct.
I have no further questions for this witness.
Any redirect?
Thank you. In reference to these messages, we'll keep this up. We don't know if it's actual people concerning this incoming data. It could be spam, correct?
It could be anything without looking at a cell phone extraction that has the copy of the messages or the message being saved through the phone company. It could be anything. We don't know.
Okay, so it would be speculating to say all these people are reaching out and trying to get a hold of this person during this period of time and he's just not responding. Fair to say?
Again, all we know is that messages are coming into the phone. Some of these are multiple. It could be one longer message broken down. Who they're coming from without checking the numbers and see who that person is, I have no idea.
So again, and you had said multiple times during cross, this could just be a large message. It doesn't mean that multiple times a person's trying to submit or transfer information.
Yeah, text messages are SMS, short message service. They go in small increments, 160 characters. So on your phone, you can type a long letter. When you hit send for transmission purposes, that gets broken down into 160 character segments and transmitted. So on the records, you see multiple messages, but it's actually one long message. So these can be one or they could be multiple.
Okay, so again, to make the characterization, these are multiple times during this time. It's not particularly accurate. It could be one long message, fair to say?
Correct, yes.
And I moved this up courtesy, but I'd like to address the last slide, please. Yes, yes, thank you. Bring this up. Turn your attention to the 2022 media locations, and previously there was a number of questions carrying a longer span of time, 2009 to 2022.
Correct.
This was just to focus your attention on the year in question, fair to say?
Correct, yes.
Your conclusions are the same.
Yes, they are.
There's been no material difference whatsoever between your previous report and this report.
Correct. Just the previous one was a longer time frame with more clutter with data.
And obviously we were interested in an efficient presentation and a more focused presentation, fair to say?
Correct.
Your opinion has not changed whatsoever.
No, it's the same.
Your conclusions have not changed whatsoever.
No, they have not.
There have been several questions concerning this, and I submit to you, it's speculation, you'd be in a better space to sell, but where a person's turning off this media location data and trying to hide their movements. Remember that line of questions?
Yes.
There was questions they could turn their phone off and they could somehow thwart being found or discovered.
Correct.
Fair to say, like they're trying to hide their locations. In this slide, and it's slide 16, this was the last slide that we were addressing for the 2022 media locations. You see in the top left corner, there's the box.
Yes.
If you could explain to us the significance of that box. It's in this report.
Yeah, it basically is just telling you that all of the media on the upper left box all occurred in January. So when we narrow it down to 1 year, it's easier to categorize how many locations are for each specific month. So those were all dated in January. And then after January, there are no media locations in that area.
Okay, so again, it appears consistent. It's not like this month of August, we have someone turning off their media locations on their phone. It appears that after January, we have February, March, April, May, June, all the way down, there's zero.
Correct.
From that location.
Correct.
Same question concerning the bottom.
Again,
The
that's
bottom
just,
box.
yeah,
You
there was
please
just
explain.
there was just one media location found in September. The other months, there was no location found in that area on the phone.
Same question on the right, the middle box right here.
Again,
Middle of the
it's-
screen to the right. Again,
it's-
if you could please go through the months and explain the significance of that.
Yeah. Again, looking at the media location for the entire year, there was only one media that had location in March in that area. The other months, there was no location whatsoever on the phone.
Again, much to do about nothing. I mean, this shows that apparently the media location part of the cell phone was not being utilized.
Well, media location is when you actually take a photograph. Someone takes a photograph. The phone didn't have any other locations stored on it, such as Google locations or from apps or from any other source whatsoever. So the lack of location, there just wasn't any on the phone. And there are phones that don't store a whole lot of locations.
Okay, so obviously fair to say that based upon your experience in this area, people change their cell phones. People purchase new ones.
Yes, and then each model and each make stores data differently. Some store more locations. It depends what apps you use on your phone. Some will store more locations, others don't. The accuracy of the location can vary tremendously. So there's a lot of issues to take into account.
If I were to tell you that there was evidence, and obviously you weren't called upon to give an opinion concerning that, concerning newspaper articles, concerns in May. Again, looking at this analysis of these three for the media locations, we don't see anything going on in May, do we?
No, we don't.
We don't see anything going on in June, July, August, correct?
Correct.
We do have down here at the lower location, a media location concerning September of 1.
Correct.
Fair to say that based upon your analysis of this phone, there's not a change. It's consistent basically month in to month out, perhaps except for January of 2022.
Yes, it is pretty consistent throughout the year that there's not a whole lot of locations stored on the phone.
And again, the change in the report isn't material. Doesn't concern your conclusions. It's just to make the presentation simpler.
Correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Any requests?
I do. There's Mark. One more thing. Sir, you remember at the beginning of cross-examination or redirect examination, you were asked a question about substantively what's going on with those text messages. And I think you said, oh, you might have to speculate. You really need to look into, celebrate, and study the messages, correct?
If you want to get the content, whether it's one long message or multiple small messages, yes.
And just to be clear, you did look at the content of the text messages on this phone as part of your work. Isn't that correct?
No, sir. That wasn't one of the items that was requested of me.
Okay. I'm showing opposing counsel, which is marked Exhibit 375. Thank you. May I approach? Mm-hmm. Sir, do you recognize when I'm about to hand you this is State Proposed 375?
Yes.
Okay. Please take a look at both pages.
Yeah, this is a report that I wrote back on August 17th.
You wrote that. That's a fair and accurate depiction of your report?
It is.
Okay. And you prepared that in conjunction with producing the original PowerPoint presentation that I kind of had and showed you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. At this time, we'd ask for admission of State Proposed 375.
You can approach me.